Hello and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast podcast, your serving of drinks, culture, and the people who drive it. I'm Marshall Tilden, Chief Revenue and Education Officer here at Wine Enthusiast. And as you can imagine, we're pretty passionate about wine education around here, which is something we have in common with the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, better known as WSET. In 2020, we even created our own Wine Enthusiast Academy and offer Level 1 and Level 2 courses curated by WSET in order to spread and share our wine education passion to as many wine lovers in the U.S. as possible. With wine education as popular as ever and increases in various wine schools up to 15% year over year, we thought it would be great to hear what's happening in the WSET world from their Global Business Development Director and Executive Director of WSET Americas, Dave Rudman. I have the good fortune and pleasure to be sitting here with my friend Dave Rudman, and I have to read your title because it's just too long. The Global Business Development Director and Executive Director of WSET's of Americas.
That's right.
That's right. Whew, that's a long one. Well, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And you just came in and we were talking. It's been a hot minute since you've been here.
Yeah, for sure.
When was the last time you came in?
I think it was 2019.
Yeah,
it was probably like late summer, so just about 5 years ago.
And that was sort of when we started up with our academy, right? That was the...
Yeah, I think you were just about like in the last stages of getting approved to be a provider. And then obviously we went through the pandemic together.
Yeah.
Which had its challenges.
And what was interesting, right, is we were planning on having the courses here in person. And then all of a sudden, we had to make the quick switch, which, to be honest, has worked out really well because we have such a huge reach with it now.
Yeah,
virtually.
No, that's been great. And we didn't even have that option really until that point in time. Because, when the pandemic started for WSET, we quickly realized if we're going to weather this thing, we've got to find a way for people to be able to take these exams, not in person, because we have no idea how long all this is going to last. So we brought out that option for people to be able to do the levels 1 and level 2 exams across all the different courses remotely. Yeah. And we brought that to the table pretty quickly, and we definitely worked out some of the kinks together early.
Yeah.
I can remember. Yeah, not too fondly.
No, but it's funny that you mentioned because I forgot it wasn't just us that had to switch to virtual. You were really starting it up for that same reason.
The whole world.
Yeah, wow, that was amazing. So, with all of your 8 titles and progression up through the WSET world to where you are, just a little bit of background about like yourself and how you got into WSET and what it is for those that don't know, because it's an amazing program.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I guess the first thing I usually say when I talk about this is that I always wanted to be an educator. So going all the way back to like middle school or high school, my career aspiration at that time pretty much was to be a teacher, and I wanted to be a high school teacher. I went to college. I got a pretty worthless degree in history and philosophy, but I went right into graduate school to be a high school history teacher. And I actually have a provisional license to teach secondary education in the state of Massachusetts. That, I don't know, probably I'll never use, but that's okay.
Sure, it's not expired.
Yeah, no, it's not expired. It's actually not expired. I've checked recently. Just for laughs. And actually I taught as a substitute teacher at pretty much kindergarten to grade 12, and just spent a few years working in public schools, and just decided that I didn't want to be a high school teacher anymore. It's real tough. My hat's definitely off to folks who educate our children, especially as we were just talking. My kid just finished kindergarten, so I'm really just starting to experience it in that way. But so like a lot of probably most people with philosophy degrees, like I ended up working in restaurants.
Right.
And I was in New York City, and this is sort of the story I always tell, is that I had waited tables in college at like a breakfast restaurant or whatever. So I figured like I had some experience waiting tables in a restaurant. Like I'm in New York City, lots of restaurants. I get a job. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be to find a job waiting tables in New York City. I lived in Brooklyn. Not too far from where I lived, there was a wine bar that had posted they were looking for a waiter or something like that. So I went in, I had an interview, and it was a husband and wife team. and the wife like ran the front of the house, and my interview started with her, and it was going really well. I thought like, good rapport. Like she was definitely asking like some buying questions. So what I was selling seemed good. And she's like, well, all right, so now my husband is going to come sit down. He was like the wine guy or whatever. And he asked me, one of the first questions he asked me was, to be able to work here, like we have 60 wines by the glass from all over the world, some obscure regions. We have like a bottle list. We sell some expensive stuff. You need to know at least a little bit about wine to be able to work here. He said, what do you know about wine? And I said, yellowtail. That was my answer. So we laughed, we laughed a little bit about that.
That's funny.
I didn't try to fake it. There's no way to fake it. Like
no,
not possible, really. So
people don't know you can't fake it.
No, you can't fake it. And so he said, look, you can't be a waiter here, but I'm looking for a bar back also for like the 3 worst days of the week or whatever. So like, if you want to, like, you can have it. We'll see, and you'll learn about wine, and like we'll see what happens or whatever. And then I learned about wine. I did, and it just became something. I sort of realized that like there was an intersection of like my desire to educate, like my love of education. So learning about wine, but then also teaching it, which is also one of the main ways that I learn is by sort of thinking in terms of how would I organize and teach someone else this, right?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
That just helps to really put things in place for me. But like also history and, philosophy and like culture and, people. All of the reasons why people find wine so compelling. It really all came together. Yeah, and over the course of about 2 years or so, I ended up like as a shift manager. So like I'm sort of running the restaurant. A few nights a week at there, learning a lot. And then I bounced around a couple of different jobs in hospitality. The last one was that I opened a wine bar in West Hartford, Connecticut. Which is still there.
Is that close to where you're located now?
Yeah, very close to where I'm located now. The wine bar is still there, like 12 years later, which is pretty remarkable. Yeah. Something I'm sort of semi-low-key proud about.
Through COVID.
Yeah, right, through COVID, through everything.
Through everything,
The lifespan of a restaurant is significantly shorter than 12
For
years.
sure.
But I got married right around then, and my wife said, you need to get a day job, which is very sensible. So that's where I got into distribution. So I worked for the largest distributor in Connecticut for 7 years, ended up as the director of education and account development there. And that was actually where I started taking WSET courses for the first time. Gotcha. And that was sort of actually one of the tickets that I punched to getting that role as director of education. And I found WSET, and I recommended it to them, and they asked me to, run a whole program. And I went through the process of becoming an approved program provider, which you went through with me a few years after that.
Was it as rigorous?
It was different. It was very different at that time because when I went through it before I was hired, there was no one based in the U.S. for WSET, and they didn't manage their own affairs in the U.S. It was managed by Mary Ewing Mulligan, M.W., in the International Wine Center.
Sure.
Which that's a whole other story. So it was a very different experience. But I taught WSET to the sales force there for a couple of years, wines and spirits. And then WSET, I heard through a recruiter, was looking to hire the first person for the U.S. And I was able to get into that process and was successful, and I was employee number 1. And
amazing.
It's been.
I actually didn't realize that you were the first one who launched really everything here in the U.S.
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah, because I wanted, Mary, who we both know, Mary Ewing Mulligan, M.W. We both did our diploma at International Wine Center in New York, which is her school.
You just wore your pin. I didn't wear mine, but I do have it also.
That's good. You can ask for a replacement. There's a form that you fill out.
I'm well aware.
We can get it to you. The contract that she had with WSET was expiring, and they had made a mutual decision after it was like 25 years or something like that, that they were going to let it run out. Because the WSET business in the U.S. had grown so much, and it wasn't really possible, I don't think.
Yeah, it was just going outside of that.
Yeah, it was really
limitation
difficult.
Yeah. Which, to her credit, right, it happened because it got so big and popular with what she was doing.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yes. So they knew that they needed to lay the foundation to be able to take over the business here for the first time. Right. So they hired me. I started, basically about January 2018, and that contract was ending August 2018. Yeah. So in a really short amount of time, we had to, be prepared to manage our own logistics and all the customer service and things that had always been handled by Mary and the IWC team needed to come to WSET. So
gotcha.
That's where we came in, and you sort of came in right in the wake of all that happening.
Yeah. So it was 2019 were our plans, launching in 2020, and so, like you said, we got firsthand some of those bumps and bruises along the way, and I know I have to say, and I think our students would. If our original students were seeing what we're doing now, you could tell a big difference.
It's a huge difference, and we see that all over the world. It's particularly with the digital end-to-end that we had to introduce during the pandemic, which we still use, which is still very popular. All over the world, particularly here in the U.S. But it's a completely different experience, which is in a very positive way. Which is excellent.
That's great. Thank you for that background, because a lot of that I did know, but a lot of it I didn't know. It's really interesting to hear. So, just for background on WSET itself, right? The origins and why it was started and kind of who's it for. Maybe you can lay a little groundwork on that.
Sure. So, trivia for the listeners here. The WSET was founded in the same room that the Institute of the Masters of Wine and the Court of Master Sommeliers was founded. So, that room is in a place called Vintners Hall. It's in London. Basically, this is very basic, and this is my American explanation. I probably won't do it justice, but they have these. It's very similar to what in the U.S. we would think of as like a trade association or whatever, or like a lobbying group or something like that. Yeah. It's basically an impartial body that sort of looks after the holistic interest of the industry. Then people buy into it. Well, that goes back like thousands of years in England to like the guild economies, right? Sure. So, there is something called the Vintners Company, and it is, sort of like a trade organization that looks after the interest of the wine trade. And going back thousands of years, there were really no wine producers to speak of in England. But despite that, England, established itself as the center of the wine universe. Like all the import and export,
everything was coming in
things
through
all
there,
flowed through London. The wine press, the wine, decanter, and things like that. Like the early wine writing was all there, right? Yeah. So WSET was founded in 1969. And usually when I talk about this, what I say is like, put yourself like in the wine industry in 1969 and think about like what the wine industry looks like at that moment, right? So we're still like 5 years before the Judgment of Paris, right? Which is like the grand opening, the grand entrance of the U.S. Yeah. But if you're in the business of buying and selling wine, or you're engaged in the wine trade in some way, you have to be noticing that there's increasingly investment being made in places outside of the traditional wine regions. So not only are you going to be importing wine from dramatically more places than you were for the last 100 years, your export markets are also growing in these places. So like wine was sort of like in the U.S. like very rudimentary. And then all of a sudden, like it's starting to really expand.
Within like a decade.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so they saw that there was a need to educate the people who were going to work in the UK wine trade, in the future wine and spirits trade. And in order to keep, their sort of captain's seat in the global wine trade, that they needed to have the best. They needed to have the most knowledgeable people in the world working in the industry. So that was what the WSET was founded for. So it's an educational charity, and its mission has sort of always roughly been to provide unbranded, unbiased, globally relevant education for people who work in the wine and spirits trade. Originally, that was really just for the UK. Now it's for the world, and you've got WSET in 80 plus countries. But the foundation has remained the same. Wherever people are learning about wine or spirits or sake or now beer with WSET, it's all about unbiased, unbranded, globally recognized, and universally relevant material.
I don't want to get into the sake and the beer because those are big and growing components of what you guys are doing. But so just in general, when you think about who can benefit, right? Like who belongs or who should be taking WSET and courses, and then we always get asked, like, what level should I take, right? Should I start at 1? Should I start at 2? Can I do 3? Is 4 crazy? Am I out of my mind? And the answer to that one is yes.
4 is very serious.
4 is very serious. So, but who out there, right? Of our listeners, we have a giant audience of people who just are sitting around enjoying wine to really intense enthusiasts and connoisseurs, right? So, how does that fit?
I would say to you, anyone who's listening to this right now would benefit from taking a WSET qualification.
I agree.
Now, a random person from the U.S. population, if you're not interested in wine, then
why bother?
You're probably not going to be interested in learning more about it. But the people who are listening have an interest in wine. It's either because they work in the trade of wine, or it's because they're wine enthusiasts.
Yep.
They're consumers of wine.
And we thank you all for listening, by the way.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things about learning with WSET that I think have contributed to the value proposition that we think it enjoys, and that we see reflected in the growth that we have in terms of the number of people and where those people come from. Right.
Sure.
Some of the most important things about studying with WSET versus studying elsewhere is that it really truly is a globally recognized qualification, and that may or may not, that may be more relevant to some than to others. But it's kind of cool, and it's kind of important to think that, especially as the wine industry continues to change and wine is coming from more and more places that it sort of never came from in the past, or at least not that you could buy in a store.
Sure.
China, India, the United Kingdom, et cetera, et cetera. Studying with WSET means that wherever you go in the world, there's a benchmark that sort of everyone connects to, and that if you're talking to somebody who studied with WSET in Hong Kong and someone who studied with WSET in South Africa, you're all speaking a very similar language. You've learned the same material. It's been taught in a consistent way.
Yeah,
and that's cool. I think that adds a lot of value.
And we'll get, we'll get to that about the tastings. We are going to do a wine tasting, so don't leave before that happens. But I always speak about that in my classes, about the common language and the lexicon that's used with WSET, which is why there's allowed and non-allowed descriptors. And it's not to be, super stringent about what you can say, but it's, knowing what a blackberry smells and tastes like, right? And I always use the example of someone says, well, it smells like my grandma's basement. Well, I don't know what your grandma's basement smells like. How am I supposed to analyze that one, right? So forming that, just dialogue, that language that everyone can understand globally, it's huge, so important.
Yeah, we are, again, like I said, the wine industry continues to change, and we put out a video a couple of years ago poking fun at translating some of the British terminology in our lexicon into American. What's treacle, or what's a gooseberry, what's porridge, or whatever.
Right.
So we had a little fun like that. We've got as a global organization, and in order to preserve that feeling of global consistency, we have to walk a line between, we really do all need to be speaking the same language about wine, or else it becomes very difficult. But what more can we do to ensure that whatever that common language is, that it's inclusive and accessible to people? Because a lot of, in America, maybe 80% of what's on the UK lexicon is instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
But if you go to other places in the world, that dips
like
a lot.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's a good point.
Yeah. So we have researchers and we have projects that are ongoing now to make some of those changes.
That's great.
And to look at some of the ways that we can develop that.
Keeping with the times of, like you said, the inclusivity of everything they're doing. That's awesome. So let's hear about the beer trend that's going on that you guys are all over, right? I mean, this is big for you.
Yeah, it's really big for WSET. So the last new product that we had was sake, and we introduced sake quite a few years ago, and actually just launched level 2 sake this year.
Oh.
So we had level 3 first, and then level 1, and now level 2. And there's a method behind that madness,
sure.
but we don't have to talk about it anymore.
No. I think I can summarize it real easily, actually, and you could tell me if I'm crazy, right? So in terms of wines, right, 3 is next level up. 3 is a very difficult course, right? And 1 is really new and just really intro to wine in really basic terms. And 2 is sort of that, where is that in-between sweet spot where you're just a little bit below 3 but higher level than 1. It's probably a lot harder to determine where that middle ground is.
It can be, yeah. I mean, level 3 first was because we knew we needed people who could teach the lower levels first.
Yeah.
Because without that, it's tough.
Yeah.
Sledding. Especially in a niche category like sake, So we came out with level 3 to establish the criteria and the bar for people who would be able to teach the lower levels. And then level 1 came, and then once you sort of reach a critical mass of people who've done level 1, aren't going on to level 3.
Right, they need that middle ground.
That's where we built the bridge.
Nice.
Yeah, so
cool.
And it's a great qualification.
Sure.
Yeah, so we launched that. But beer is something that there was 50 years ago, there was beer content in WSET. So there weren't separate product categories. There was only one track, and it covered mostly wines, but it covered a lot of spirits, covered beer, covered things like cigars. There was actually cigars were part of WSET.
Which is now, right, and that's the Somm, right? That's covers cigars as well, right?
As far as I can remember, it's been a few years since I did my certified Somm with the court. But yeah, I know, I remember at some point there was talk about cigars. So I think there's, don't quote me.
No, me either.
Yeah. So beer had been talked about for years. People, it was a popular question that we would get. We would get questions from people, oh, what about beer? This would be great for beer. Why aren't you guys into this? It's such a big industry in and of itself. It's very, in some ways it's very separate from the wine and spirits focused trade. And I don't know. It was time.
Yeah.
It was time for us to think about what else we wanted to do. And I think the primary considerations for us, there were really 2, was 1, do we have or can we acquire the expertise to do this right?
Sure.
And I think we proved that the answer to that was yes. Because we've engaged with, and we have one of, I would say, maybe one of the 20 most qualified people on earth to be working with us. Her name is Mirella Amato. She's one of about 20-ish master cicerones in the world, and she came in and worked with some of the other experts that we have and people on my team. So Mirella is my senior business development manager for beer here in the Americas, but we work with Natalia Watson, who's very influential, very big deal for us to be working with her for EMEA, and then also Jane Lewis, who came out of a career running breweries and owning a brewery, and super dialed in and very well known. So we work with unbelievable talent. So like I said, that was a consideration because we didn't have that talent. And we didn't necessarily, it's easy for us to go and connect with wine people because we're deep in that network. We didn't have the network with beer. So we had to go out and find it. We did a great job. We work with some of the best people in the world for that.
Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find. Only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly. Be 21.
I just want to talk about, as we're staying on trends, because something that we're just seeing in the wine industry, and I'm wondering how it affects WSET also, is lower alcohol,
Sure.
lower ABV wines, right? So is that being addressed? Is that being, becoming part of a edition of a curriculum, or is it just something that we're watching on?
It 100% factors into our regular product review processes. So we have, for all of our different qualifications across all the different levels, we have product review cycles where we're either in the process of launching a new edition, an update, or taking on the feedback and thinking about the next one. So it's a constant iterative process. And, we're constantly having to consider, what regions of the world need to be in and which ones need to be out, and that changes. But lots of other things, and low and no is a really important thing. And if you want to be able to continue to say that you're globally recognized and universally relevant, you have to stay up on that stuff.
Yeah.
So it 100% factors in, and I think that there's a lot to learn about that and how it differs and how it's the same. And
my thought, or where it goes, is how long the trend stays, and if it's here, is it a trend or is it just a thing? And then does that affect the middle medium range of alcohol for wines in general, right? Because right now that 11 to 14% becomes the middle. Does that extend to 10 to 14%?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I would be interested to know. I wish I knew right now if there was a historical precedent for changing those levels, because clearly over the last 55 years, the average ABV of wines that make it to the world stage has gone up, a pretty considerable amount.
So just so everyone knows, WSET, right, from 11 to 14% is considered the medium range in alcohol. But if you see just about anything out of California, white or red, you're going to be 14 or up, right?
Above.
Or everything is on the higher end,
Right.
So, this trend is just interesting on that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut it off.
No, not at all. I would also say things like climate change have drastically reduced the number of non-deliberately low alcohol wines.
Just naturally.
Right. So 50 years ago, German. You study your diploma or level 3. You study German wine law, and you start to understand and appreciate why some things are allowed, like chaptalization. Why is that allowed? Well, it's because historically it was a real struggle to make wine in some of the colder climates, and in the colder years it would have been otherwise impossible to get to a level of sugar where you could make alcohol, where you can do a fermentation.
Which is what that is the addition of sugar.
Right, yeah.
And gotta clarify some of that stuff.
And it's not really, I don't think, it doesn't not really a problem anymore.
Right. So, I haven't heard that word in a long time.
Right. So just nobody is struggling to reach even, a basic level of sugar. In Germany or anywhere else for that matter. So,
So, kind of leading into our tasting here, because I'm interested to see what you think about this, Wes.
Okay, sure.
But blind tasting. Right?
Okay.
Blind tasting, huge part of especially level 4 and a little bit of level 3, right?
Yeah.
Takes a lot of practice. You got to taste a lot of wines. When I was studying, and I'm sure everybody has some similar story, you need somebody to pour the wines for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because the second you see the bottle, game's over. And so I had my wife at 10, 11 o'clock at night when the kids are down. So luckily enough here, there's a lot of wines to sample. We do tasting. Are you still keeping your chops intact in terms of your blind tasting?
I love tasting. And I tell people, and I don't know whether or not this is true. This is the story I'm going with.
Okay.
Is that because I had such limited access to wine because I was poor.
Yeah. Right.
When I was learning about wine as a barback in New York, I really made an effort to memorize as much as I could the descriptors that other people would use for different styles of wine. So probably the book that was most influential for me in those early days was Karen McNeil's Wine Bible.
Sure, yeah.
And she does a really great job of every varietal or appellation that she talks about. She includes a lot of the really typical
For that.
descriptors, right? So I think my brain works differently now because I sort of etched the profiles into my head without ever actually tasting them. And I can offer as evidence, right? So when I was doing my diploma, I went in and did my sparkling, which was D6 at the time, right? And I did really well. I found out after the class that I nailed the wine.
Oh, nice.
And what was really interesting about that for me was that I was on one of the wines, and I was like, this is what it tastes like. I'm like, I know what this tastes like, right? And I'm like, I think this is Sekt. Because I know what Sekt is supposed to taste like.
Which is German sparkling.
German sparkling wine, yeah. I have never tasted Sekt in my life. I literally have never tasted it. I'm like, this is probably, if this is Sekt, this is the first time I've ever tasted it.
Right.
But
on
I was very confident that even though I had never tasted it before, just because I was like, look, I can describe what this tastes like, and I know for a fact that it most closely resembles the typical tasting note for Sekt, and not anything else. Yeah. And I wrote it, and it was right.
And you're done.
And awesome. There have been a couple of other ones that I nailed like that, and it's not because I'm an exceptionally gifted taster, but I think it's because I have a remarkably well-developed database in my head
of what these grapes and wines and what they should taste like.
And so I'm very, very deductive and logical as opposed to subjective and so that's been an advantage for me. Yeah, you have to have. Yeah,
just got to
have the tasting under your belt.
Speaking of which, we waited long enough.
All right.
So we was thinking about doing it blind, but I wanted to give Dave a little break here, so we thought we would just go through an actual WSET-style tasting, and we got some of our Wine Enthusiast glasses, which I'd like Dave to try out as well, because I don't think he's seen these. So that's our Xenology Somm, and this is our Aria. This is a cab glass, but for this kind of wine. So this is 2020 single vineyard Chard, San Giacomo. They make nothing of this. 320 cases. I'm not going to talk about the alcohol. That's all I'm going to talk about. Everything else. Do you want your piece of paper?
Sure, thank you.
Otherwise, I have to fault you in color.
Right, I know.
So, color, we're looking for intensity in color, and for white wines, we're going to do kind of level 2-ish, right? 2 with maybe a hint of 3, right?
Sure.
Maybe some plus or minus.
Yeah, so, we might opine.
We might. It happens, right? So, where are you on the light, medium?
I would say it's a medium intensity.
Because of the pigmentation,
yeah.
Right? So the color at this level, we look to see how far the pigmentation goes up to the rim, and if it's pretty watery, it's light. If the pigmentation goes close to the edge, it's medium, and if it's all the way to the edge, it's deep.
Yeah.
Right? And then color. For level 2, we either have yellow or gold. I'm leaning on gold on this one.
Yeah, I would go medium gold,
right?
As well.
Yeah. So I think we're at medium gold. I love when Dave and I agree on wines. It's a beautiful thing. All right. So then we swirl. And intensity. How are you on intensity? So intensity, for me, and this is how and we start at the chin. If you can smell it from your chin, and if you can smell the good stuff, right? You can't just smell something. You got to be able to pull something out of it.
Yeah, I think it's pronounced.
I think it's pronounced, right? I can smell it here. I can kind of smell when I poured it, too.
To what extent do you think it's these premium Wine Enthusiast glasses?
Nothing. This is all about the wine.
I give you a little plug there.
There's a little bit. So pronounced. So now we start to smell aromas, and I always go fruit first, right?
Sure.
It's the first fruit that we smell. Even if sometimes fruit's not the first thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I get a golden apple. Is very strong here. Definitely those orchard fruits.
Yep.
So, and it's a pretty developed golden apple, so like almost like a baked, like a pie filling, like kind of apple. Yeah, and that goes really nice with a little bit of lemon blossom as well, so some citrus aroma, I think, here.
Yep. Which for Chardonnay, especially from Napa, right, this is kind of typical.
Pretty typical. Yeah,
warm climate, baked fruit, 2020.
Yeah.
So we're talking on primaries. Mm-hmm. How about on secondaries? What are we getting on there? So spices.
Plenty of oak aroma. Yeah.
Plenty of that vanilla.
Absolutely. Vanilla. Yeah, a little nutmeg, clove.
Yep.
There's like a creme, like a little creme anglaise sort of situation.
So we got some of that creamy, buttery biscuit note, right?
Sure.
Doing some stirring on the leaves on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Tertiary? Not too much.
I'm not getting a lot, no.
Nah, either. All right. Let's taste it.
Let's go.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
So for my students and for any level of WSET, we go SAT-TAB, sweetness, alcohol, tannins, alcohol body, and we go different levels, right? So I use an acronym of sipping all the awesome Brunello or Bordeaux or Burgundy. I
like that.
Little acronym there, right? You can use that one. That's all right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So sweetness.
Not here,
right?
Dry.
Dry as a bone. Acidity.
It's high.
It's high, right? Yeah, it's not even medium. So the acidity trick is, for me, I taste, wait about 10 seconds, put your head down, and when you feel all that saliva, coming down and coming out of your mouth almost and drooling,
Yeah.
that's high.
Well, it's the moment that I know that I'm really going to like it.
Nice.
Particularly for New World Chardonnay. Like, this is the moment I've been waiting for.
Yeah, New World Chardonnay, right.
It did not disappoint.
Yeah, good. Awesome.
Acidity, yeah.
Tannin,
White wine.
Right, white wine, so tannin.
Not there.
Alcohol?
Feels like high alcohol. Yeah.
So
Combination of viscosity and sort of like heat potency. Yeah.
back of the tongue burn,
Yep.
right? That back of the tongue burn.
Sure.
High, it's 14.5.
Okay.
Good call. And body, B for body.
Full-bodied wine.
Full body, right? It's got high alcohol, acidity, concentration,
Yeah.
right? Flavors.
Great weight on the palate. Creaminess.
Creaminess, yeah. The creamy texture on this is dynamite, right? Oh, he's going back for another sip. This is a Wine Express wine, so I'm very happy that Dave seems to be enjoying it. Flavors similar to the nose, right? Spices coming out a little bit more prevalent, maybe?
Yeah, I think anytime, especially when you have a high acidity wine on the palate, it tends to then, it brings out more of the citrus notes, which I get a lot. So on the nose, this smells like a lot more about like oak and like sort of baked apples, but like definitely very snappy kind of lime gets brought out.
Yeah, the
on
lime
the
zest,
palate,
yeah,
which I
sure.
love.
Yep.
I love that a lot because I think it's important to balance like the sort of citrus with the stone fruit, particularly with New World Chardonnay.
Totally.
So yeah, really,
Yeah.
to me that's the main difference. Otherwise, mostly confirming a lot of what we said on the nose, but just when you do have the acidity, like it plays a trick and like it says,
Citrus.
now I
Acidity,
get the citrus more.
right?
Yeah.
Acidity, yeah, totally. Length? Well, intensity, sorry, flavor intensity.
It's intense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, pronounced.
Definitely.
Yeah. And length?
It's long.
Long,
Yeah.
right?
I'm still definitely tasting.
Still tasting it, right, while we're talking.
both citrus and stone fruit, vanilla. Yeah.
Yep. So level 2, now we get to do a little bit of assessment, right? In WSET, we talk about BLIC, balance, length, used to be intensity, identifiable characteristics, right? Both are eyes, so it's good, it works.
Yeah, it works.
And complexity. So balance, we see if it gets the check mark on all of these, and then we can decide what it is.
It gets my check mark.
Yeah, balance. And always balance. What's balance with what? And what you just said, right? The acid
Yeah.
balancing with the citrus fruit.
Exactly.
With the high alcohol,
The
right?
weight, the alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. Length, we got it.
Long,
We said it's
said.
long. Identifiable characteristics, intensity,
Yeah.
pronounced, and that's
That's both on the
California
nose and on the palate.
palate.
Yeah, it brings a lot of flavor, both primary and secondary flavors.
Yep.
All of them very distinctive. Like
Yeah,
harmonious. Yeah.
and complexity.
Yeah, I mean, we picked a good amount of stuff out between primary and secondary aromas and
Yeah,
flavors.
yeah, and I think once you have that, right? Once you have primary, secondary, I mean tertiary, obviously, gets into the to the no-brainer check
Right.
level, but I think there's enough on both to give it.
And we didn't really like geek all the way
This
out
is
on
quick.
calling out
Right,
stuff.
this is like the quick snapshot version,
yeah,
right?
So I could have gone a little bit more.
100%. But then Rob gets mad, so.
Yeah.
So it gets all 4 check marks. So in level 2, right, there's poor, good, no, poor, acceptable, good, very good, outstanding.
Outstanding, yeah. It's an outstanding wine for sure. You know, our evaluation of it definitely puts it in that category.
And I agree. It's like probably one of my favorite Chardonnays right now that we bring in. So now we deviate from WSET and we ask my final question on any of these wines, especially from Wine Express. What would you pay?
Feels like a $40 Chardonnay, maybe 40 to $60.
From the winery, you'd be a little bit off, like 50, 55, but here at Wine Express, $30.
$30,
Right? So for $30, kind of a no-brainer, right?
beats the pants off of a lot of $30 Chardonnay I've drank in my life.
And you know, that's kind of what one of the things we do. It's just we taste through a lot of wines that are good and very good, but we want the ones that are outstanding.
Yeah.
So we can we'll sit and talk more over.
Single Vineyard Sonoma Coast.
Yeah.
That's great.
Not too shabby.
Really nice.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Dave. This is a great conversation. As always, I enjoy speaking with you, but even in this platform where you're giving our listeners so much information about WSET and all that's there and all that's to come.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And as I say to people, I'm grateful for everything that you do and everything that everyone here at Wine Enthusiast and all of our listeners, what they do for WSET and for wine education and spirits education and sake and check out beer for sure.
Check out beer.
And people can visit our website at wsetglobal.com to learn more and to find out where they can take a course. And
awesome.
It's awesome.
And of course, we'll have more information on how to take courses here at our Wine Enthusiast Academy with working on beer to come soon. So
a fine choice.
Stay tuned
look
on
forward
that.
to that.
Yeah, stay tuned, man. Well, Dave, cheers. It's good to
Thanks,
see you.
Marshall.
Appreciate you.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Do you have a passion for wine education? If so, check out our Wine Enthusiast Academy, where you can take online Level 1 and Level 2 courses from anywhere in the U.S. at your own pace. Just go to wineenthusiastacademy.com to sign up. You can email us your comments and questions at podcast@wineenthusiast.net. Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite shows. You can also go to wineenthusiast.com/podcast for more episodes and transcripts. I'm Marshall Tilden. Thanks for listening.